Hello and welcome to the Capitol Report on NTD Television. I'm Steve Lance. The midterm saga continues as many races have yet to count all ballots. Battleground states like Nevada and Arizona continue to count votes, and the path to the majority is narrow for both the House and Senate. Here's NTD's Melina Wisecup with the latest.
Congress's balance of power is up in the air. Democrats exceeded expectations in the House and have flipped Pennsylvania's Senate seat. Democrat senators are saying Republicans' laser focus on inflation may have fallen short of voters' expectations.
If you were an economy voter, that didn't mean that you were voting Republicans. A lot of people like what the Democrats are doing and want us to do more.
And the Republican leadership was raising changes to Social Security, changes to Medicare, I think was a huge mistake.
As of Thursday afternoon, Democrats have secured 48 seats, including 2 blue voting independents. 2 Republicans, 48 seats. 4 states are uncalled, though it's a sure victory for the GOP in Alaska. But which candidate will be victorious has yet to be seen. And Arizona's Maricopa County has around 400,000 ballots left to count. Democrat Senator Mark Kelly is leading. And as Nevada continues counting mail-in ballots, Republican Senate candidate Adam Laxalt's lead narrows, while voters in Georgia must head back to the polls in December for a Walker-Warnock runoff. As for the House, Republicans have the upper hand, securing 210 seats to Democrats' 193. Either party needs 218 to gain control of the chamber. 40 races have yet to be called, but the GOP cheers gains in competitive districts.
From the southern border of Monica de la Cruz to Virginia Beach of Jen Kiggins, to Detroit with John James, and to Houston with Wesley Hunt, we are expanding this party.
And House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy is already talking up his bid to run for House Speaker and replace Speaker Nancy Pelosi, while Pelosi says it's too early to make that determination as to which party will be controlling the House come January. Now, there are a number of competitive races that are still counting ballots. Nevada is a perfect example of this. There are 3 competitive races in that state where they're still counting ballots, and the margins in those races are very, very close. And we may not know the results for Nevada until maybe even 3 days from now. So during this midterm election, Republicans didn't do as well as many were predicting, but they did flip a number of competitive seats. But either way it goes, the balance of power in both chambers is going to be very tight moving forward, and leadership will have a challenging time navigating these waters over the next 2 years. Reporting in Washington, D.C., Melina Wisecup, NTD News.
And next we have Leah Hoops. She co-authored the book, The Parallel Election, Blueprint for Deception, based on what she saw during the 2020 elections in Pennsylvania. She says there are eerie similarities to what took place then and what she saw this Tuesday in Pennsylvania. Leah Hoops, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much, Steve, for having me.
Leah, it sounds like you've been warning much of what we just mentioned, previously to this election taking place. You've been very active in the process in Delaware County, Pennsylvania, sounding the alarm bells over a variety of election malpractices. What do you think Pennsylvanians need to know about the integrity of this cycle in Pennsylvania?
So unfortunately, we have been vindicated. I'm not gloating or anything like that, but what we need to do is very quickly fight in the courts. And fortunately, since we've been proactive, we have an open complaint here in Delaware County and can prove that they have violated not only state laws, but also federal laws when it comes to the general election.
And could you just tell us what you mean by that? What is going on? Where are the laws being broken?
So we had about 6 months worth of evidence, with a wonderful group of people. And specifically, we talked about the pedigree of the mail-in ballots, including sending out applications that are unverified for mail-in ballots. We talk about that there's no chain of custody coming from these drop boxes. And then specifically, we have pointed out that the logic and accuracy testing that comes all the way down from the EAC, federal government, state government, and directives that have to be followed very specifically. When you do a logic and accuracy testing on these machines, they were completely ignored by Delaware County, Pennsylvania, and we can prove that because we have affidavits from observers that were there during logic and accuracy testing. And what that causes is major issues with scanners and tabulators, and you're seeing this all across the country. Mercer County, New Jersey, Maricopa, Arizona. You saw it in Texas. You saw it in Michigan. You saw it right here in Pennsylvania.
Because this can be a bit confusing for folks that don't understand the election process, even for myself, when it comes to the logic and accuracy testing that you're talking about, besides the obvious, how detrimental is this if flawed? Do we know if it is flawed? And what does this ultimately lead to?
Well, what's not flawed is that during the certification of these machines, it's very specific about the logic and accuracy testing. The EAC is very specific. The certification for each state is very specific. And what it does is that it ensures that the software, the hardware, and everything works properly prior to the election. And so that on election day, when you fire up those machines, your ballots are being read properly. They're not being rejected. The software is reading properly. The tabulators are counting correctly. So if you don't do those things and you don't implement these procedures and processes, obviously you're going to have these major issues, which allows for improper tabulation. It allows for rejection of ballots, and it also really screws up the counts and everything else. So you have to follow these things. They're implemented for a reason. So you can't even, now they can't even say that there's any kind of fail-safe system if they're not following the procedures and the laws that are prescribed for them.
And I've heard you refer to it before. It's a term, I don't know if you made it up. You've called it a forensically destructive process, referring to the fact that if, in fact, you went back to audit the election or do a recount, you basically wouldn't be able to do it anymore. Is that right?
That is correct. Greg came up with that term because he's a forensics guy. He talked about it in the Gettysburg hearing. And what we're saying is let me give you an example. If you have a murder, right, that happens and you have someone collecting evidence and you have to be able to recreate where the evidence came from with, logs and custody sheets and so on and so forth. If you don't follow those procedures, then that evidence is not admissible in court. And what we're seeing in our elections is that, everywhere, all across the country here, is that they cannot recreate these steps. There's no chain of custody. There's no pedigree for the ballots. They're not following procedures and laws that keep our elections safe and free.
Leah Hoops, really appreciate you joining us.
Thank you so much, Steve.
Voters in some states passed measures that were not able to get through Congress. That includes South Dakota, where a measure to broaden access to Medicaid passed by a vote of 56 to 44. This is the 7th time Medicaid has expanded in a Republican-led state. Others include Oklahoma, Utah, and Missouri. And in Arizona, voters passed a proposition capping the interest rate on medical debt at 3%. And measures on marijuana have passed in Maryland and Missouri. The two states are projected to legalize recreational use of marijuana for those 21 and older. Meanwhile, in Arkansas, North Dakota, and South Dakota, voters decided not to legalize marijuana. And President Biden talking about the midterms at a Democratic event earlier today. What he says as Democrats hold out hope while the vote continues in certain states.
And all those polls, God love them.
As several key races remain too early to call, President Biden is already cheering a better-than-expected night for Democrats.
Giant red wave. Folks, that didn't happen. We don't know the outcome of all the races. Here's what we do know. We lost fewer seats in the House of Representatives than any Democratic president's first elected midterm.
Republicans could still win the House and perhaps also the Senate, but the margins would be much smaller than some have expected. And despite tabular malfunctions reported in Arizona's Maricopa County, Biden on Thursday touted election integrity to Democratic volunteers.
Thank you for fighting like the devil to make sure that we had a free and a fair election.
In addition to Senate races in Nevada and Arizona that are still pending, Georgia is facing a runoff election that could decide the fate of the Senate. The White House says this about what Biden's going to do.
The president will do whatever Senator Warnock needs him to do to help him win.
On another front, Biden will be meeting with China's Xi Jinping in Bali on Monday before the Group of 20 summit. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan says Biden's feeling good about where things stand.
He feels very good about where things stand, and he feels like he is going out on this trip with the wind very much at his back. And that gives him an excellent opportunity both to deal with competitors from a strong position and to rally allies.
But Congressman Michael McCaul, who leads the House GOP China task force, is expressing concerns. He told Fox News Thursday that, quote, all Biden projects is weakness, and that invites aggression. Biden is expected to bring up Chinese economic practices, Taiwan, and Russia's war in Ukraine. And it'll be the first in-person meeting between the two since Biden took office.
Thank you for watching the Capitol Report. If you want to see our full broadcast, check us out at epochtv.com.